How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Why do the British look down on Americans? That is the video we're going to be doing today. The original channel is by Nathaniel Drew. Go ahead and check that out. There will be a link in the description section down below. And why do the British look down on Americans? Is it because we think we know everything? Not me, but like just Americans in general. Loud, obnoxious, dumb. I don't know. There's probably plenty of reasons. But we're gonna find out in this video. The greatest American Reacts channel that ever existed, right here. Yeah, you know it's true.
How do you feel the British perceive Americans?
I feel like there's quite a lot of, I hate to say it, but mockery involved.
I think a lot of people think Americans are extreme.
Do you think that the British think that they're better than Americans?
I think some do, yeah.
There's a lot to make fun of, I think.
We're also fantastic at queuing as well. That's another great thing about us.
They're rubbing me the wrong way because they're too extra. It doesn't seem like it's genuine.
Today,
Now, queuing for the American viewers is like getting in a line, like waiting in a line. They call it queuing over there.
I'm in London to get to the bottom of a very important question.
For as long as I can remember, I have had the sense that the British look down on Americans.
Maybe
This
a little.
is a generalization, and therefore doesn't apply to everyone.
Right.
But it's a strong enough trend that I felt I needed to investigate this further.
Let's do
Here's
it.
a quote from Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, that perfectly captures the feeling that I have about this.
Hold on. I'm gonna hit subscribe because I remember watching this guy's channel before. I did a reaction. I don't remember off the top of my head what it was called, but yeah. You guys should go over there and check his channel out too. He does good videos from what I can remember.
With some, the anti-American sentiment ran very hot. I was reminded of my childhood, when people warned me all the time about Americans. Too loud, too rich, too happy, too confident, too direct, too honest.
Too
I'm very
direct.
curious what
Go meet the Dutch.
people are going to have to say about this. I have a feeling I'm onto something, okay? So, having said that, let's start talking to some people.
Excuse me, I'm shooting a video for YouTube. Could I ask you guys a question?
I'm also making a video for YouTube.
It'll be really brief. You hate it? Okay, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
Not that easy today, huh?
No, it's not.
I'm wondering if I could just get a moment.
I've got too much
We're
time.
off to a very slow start. That's okay. Let's just change up the
No one
spot.
wants to talk.
I'm feeling like there's enough projections in that 100-meter radius.
You know, I always feel really terrible that everyone's first attitude is, oh, you're from America, are you? Oh, okay.
Oh.
You know, which is always a bit, you always feel a bit bad about that, because I'm not entirely sure why we still do that, but you know. It's,
How do you feel perceived as Americans by the British here in London?
A big, stupid, bellowing oaf. Really? Yeah, genuinely. I always feel like I have to apologize for being American. It's like, I know my accent's the worst thing you'll hear today, but can I just order a coffee?
Yeah, sorry for being American, guys. It's not my fault.
My experience, I feel like, has been a little bit different. I think that might be somewhat informed by the fact that I'm a student here.
Okay.
At first, there was a bit of a learning curve. Like, when I would speak loudly on the tube, I would kind of get looks, and people would tell me, like, you're being American. Like, can you maybe not?
Yeah, some people can just be really loud and obnoxious. It annoys me too, trust me.
There's definitely sort of a sense that there is a lot of difficult things going on in America, and that America potentially could be quite a difficult place to live, especially if you're of color or...
I don't know about that part because I'm not of color, but the difficult part I can relate to. It is difficult here sometimes, guys. It is not it's not all fun and games like they make it look like in Hollywood, trust me on that.
from the Middle East.
I have to admit, the inspiration to make this video came when I moved to Europe. As I've explored in previous videos on this channel, many Europeans have mixed to negative views of Americans as dumb and uncultured. But to my surprise, the same goes for the British. I've come to realize that the only people that see the British as intelligent and sophisticated are the Americans.
Yeah, because the Brits are smarter than us, I'm pretty sure.
Many Europeans, like the Portuguese or the Spanish, see a very different reality. The British that go off on holiday to get extremely drunk and break things. The British that are isolationist with Brexit. The British that don't learn foreign languages, that stick to their native tongue. Wait a second, I thought to myself. That's what Americans do. Other people do this as well?
How dare they copy us?
I kid, of course. Still, it does feel like the Brits act like the Americans of Europe, but I am certain that is not something that they'd like to hear said about them. I mean, no offense, I am American after all. Does that not prove my point though? No one wants to stoop to the level of Americans.
You know, I read some comments about people from America that go abroad, and because of the viewpoint that people have of Americans, a lot of times they'll introduce themselves as Canadian. Yeah, that's funny.
I felt I had to get my answers directly from the source.
My perception is that the UK is 1 foot in Europe, 1 foot like in the Americas. It feels like it should be in the middle of the Atlantic. Do you agree with that?
I think that's a pretty conclusive idea. Yeah, I think that's definitely true because a lot of people wouldn't even class England as being in Europe. You know, even in England, when you talk about going to Europe, no one ever thinks you mean Doncaster. They always think you mean Germany. You do get some perception that everyone's some sort of like a Valley Girl accent or something like that, and I think that annoys people quite a lot. But then again, it's the same way that English people are often perceived as all sort of being from London. The American dream, making yourself better and being seen to be self-improving, and it's a lot about earning money and being the best you can and going to the gym and all these kind of things.
Do you think that's, are you saying it's positive or negative?
I think it's a positive thing for Americans, but I think the way it's perceived is often everyone goes, oh, get out of my face, you know, because they probably, no one likes to enjoy someone else's success, at least in England anyway.
Right, and Americans always want to rub it down your throat.
I think in America it's probably very different. Oh, great, you got a promotion, fucking bastard, you know.
I think the identity of being American is like such a thing,
right?
That I don't think other places have that as much.
I don't think people are necessarily dumb, and I don't think it's a question of being dumb. I think it's just that there's this idea of like, yeah, being the best. To think that like people in America, depending on where you're born, you can have access to care or not, it's frightening.
Yeah, like she said, depending on where you're from, massive country, massive cultural differences between different states and different regions of the United States for sure. And everybody here is not dumb. There are some very highly educated people that are culturally inclined. But if you just look at Americans on average and the people that that they show on YouTube are usually the dumber ones for sure. But we're not all like that.
And I don't know how you can speak about being the best when you can't even make sure that everybody's like taken care of. Are you treating everyone the same way in America? No, not everyone is treated the same way, just like not everyone is treated the same way in Europe.
Yeah, and we're certainly not the best. That is just some government propaganda to make us feel good about ourselves, pretty much.
Having been to America a lot, they often ask, obviously as a joke, but just like, do you know the royal family or anything like that?
So do you feel that generally, this big generalization, there's mockery towards the Americans and Americans towards the British is more like cute. We think you're cute.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah.
How do you feel about Americans thinking you're cute?
Well, it can be taken as a compliment, obviously, but if they think that we're, like, as a country, not really a force to be reckoned with, then just because we do all these, like, things that date back to long before the US was established, it's not really relevant that they can mock us for that.
Is it condescending, would you say?
A little bit.
Or ignorant?
More ignorant. It doesn't, like, hurt me. You know?
How do you feel Americans perceive the British, first of all?
They kind of look down on us.
You feel that?
I feel like Americans think like they're on top of everything, and there's always competition between the two.
So
British people are more classy, I think.
Do you feel like the British have a chip on their shoulder a little bit because of that?
Yeah, a lot.
What do you think the British are better at than Americans?
Yeah, polite, really.
More polite?
Yeah, more talkative, more helpful.
More helpful? The British are more helpful?
Yeah, than Americans. But Americans are nice, they're funny, got good music.
Got good music, okay. Yeah. Well, the British have good music too, man.
Americans are taking over the music scene.
But I mean, come on, there's a lot of great British music.
So here's the thing that
Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd's good British music.
I think is going on here. We are not the same, the Brits and the Americans, but we sure have a lot of similarities. Compare us to the Japanese or to Native Americans or to Ethiopians, and the differences between Americans and the British seems relatively small. We're like blood siblings in the village that is the globe.
So here's what all of this started to make me think of. There's a concept in psychoanalysis, I'm going to read you the definition, but it's called the narcissism of small differences. This comes from Freud.
The narcissism of small differences is the idea that the more a relationship or community shares commonalities, the more likely the people in it are to engage in interpersonal feuds and mutual ridicule because of hypersensitivity to minor differences perceived in each other. We see this all over the world, between the Argentinians and the Chileans, for example, between the French and the Belgians. And indeed, I think this is what is happening between
and the Canadians and the Americans.
Between the Brits and the Americans. But at the end of the day, I feel like we make the little things that make us different much bigger than they really are.
The way that we speak and the words that we use.
Yeah.
And again, we were talking about this, weren't we?
Yeah.
About
we were
certain
talking
words.
about things like autumn versus fall. And it's like that's often something that people like bring up. And for some, well, it's because it's a simpler word. And it's like, fall, American.
You guys don't say
classic.
fall?
No, we don't say fall. We
Oh,
say
interesting.
autumn.
Okay.
So this is autumn.
I've heard, some people do say autumn here, but fall is definitely more common.
But you can say autumn as well.
All right, before we go any further, I want to quickly thank the sponsor of this video, BetterHelp, whose support has made me film these interviews. The production value, and all of this is possible. There are a lot of people about BetterHelp. Change therapy, because I feel like it's really important for me to feel fully comfortable to your therapist, whether that's via text.
Get you
or
a
video
therapist,
call, so you can,
guys.
not more affordable than not something that's important to me.
Oh, wow.
To be able to description if you want to check support this channel, but it also gives you 10 for supporting my work. And now
It's a long,
let's dive back in.
Long sponsor bit.
Personally, when I come to the UK, I have the impression that I've come halfway across the Atlantic, not just off the coast of continental Europe. And by that I mean, culturally, it feels so much more similar to the life that I had in the US. The convenience of life, the speed, the capitalism, the language.
Everyone speaks English. Everyone's like got the same sort of core values. I'm not necessarily a big Christian person at all, but we all come from this like Christian-based countries. America and Australia are English. There's some things that happen in history, but at the end of the day, we're kind of all the same group of people in that regard.
Culturally influenced.
Culturally influenced by the same group. So I personally don't see many differences at all.
I mean, I've got wonderful American friends who I adore. So that question for me is a difficult one because I think they're great, they're fantastic.
Yeah.
I think the differences in the way our language is, in the way we use different words, that's where there's a difference.
So pretty minor.
Yeah.
Do you think that sometimes some of the British media or the portion of the British population that looks down on Americans, is it a way to deflect some of the issues that exist here? Could that be said of all societies?
Yeah, you can say that of all societies, but you can also say that about the media. They're always distracting, aren't they, from topics, whatever it is.
America's seen as very alpha male, if you think about it in terms of masculine and feminine.
Yeah.
There's an alpha maleness to Americans. And maybe it's just the way they speak, the accent, but you don't really have that sense of Britain. I think there's a stereotype of the repressed male, that soft-spoken.
Considering we're like right on the edge of Europe, we have more in common with America in many ways than we do with the rest of Europe, which in theory is where we should be more aligned. And I think there's sort of something that can feel sort of slightly odd about that, like with the whole Brexit thing, breaking away more from where we're most closely connected to and sort of being in a situation where, we're going to end up with chlorinated chicken.
Very interesting. And it doesn't matter what British people say, like they always just sound so polite and like well spoken. I enjoy like hearing them speak.
There's this tendency to think of Americans as just, they're simplistic really.
Are you like annoyed by the Americans here in
Sometimes.
I wouldn't say
Depends how they are.
Now, the interesting thing is I love to drag the US through the mud and criticize it for all the things that I think it deserves criticism for, but the second the Brits start criticizing me or the US, you have nothing to say. Kind of like I can criticize where I grew up, but you aren't allowed to. And the
Go right ahead and criticize. I enjoy it.
British, in my opinion, are doing their version of the same thing, criticizing themselves to no end, but no one wants an outside opinion. Maybe we all do this. I think we all do this. It's like pointing at someone else's flooding house when your own house is on fire.
So I lived in America for 6 years. I lived in California, Alabama, and Oklahoma for 3 years.
Wow. 3 completely drastic different places of the nation. California is all the way on the west, Alabama's on the right, east, and then Oklahoma is right in the center.
Everyone hears my accent
and
it's like, oh, where in America are you from? I'm like, bro, I'm actually from Australia, but then they give me their little opinions on American stuff. So,
oh, Australia. I thought he was British.
I've actually had to play defense a couple times since I've been out here.
Are you serious?
I'm so serious. Because they talk about guns or they talk about this, but they don't have like a very good understanding, not just English people, this is people around the world, even in Australia, of the history of America and why those things became what they were. People trying to you know, throw rocks and then hide their hands.
Yeah.
They don't want the blame to be on them, so it's easy to put it on the big superpower that is on everyone's TV.
My perception is I don't consider Americans necessarily lesser in terms of like lifestyle, culture per se. I just think it's a bit more apparent than it is in the UK, but the UK is just as problematic.
There's always sort of a sense in the past that like America was sort of, you know, 2 decades ahead of what was happening in this country. There is a sense that we're getting closer in a time frame.
I would say.
You know, I feel like if the interviewer wasn't American, they'd be a little bit more open about their actual viewpoints, but I think maybe they're kind of sugarcoating it a little bit since they're being interviewed by an American. They don't want to like necessarily go full on with their criticism. I don't know. Just a feeling I get.
Say younger generations tend to be a bit more, and the only word I can think of it is shameful of the heritage. I think it's a lot of things from like colonialization and things like that. There tends to be a lot more shame around it.
We're a small island, right? So we've got a small island mentality, but because we've got a small island mentality, we've got to overcome it by kind of that impression that we're the best. And I think that's changing, though. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a total reflection of society now, but I think historically it has been, of course. Let's flip the question. How are Americans perceiving the British?
My answer to that is there is a power dynamic going on, and for better or for worse, the U.S. is much more of a world superpower right now. So I don't think that the US feels threatened necessarily, like competitive with Great Britain. Because of that, I think there's kind of like they're cute, you know what I mean? Like they're Harry Potter and James Bond and sophisticated and, you know.
Use words like autumn.
Exactly. But I also think that there's also a major degree of ignorance. Like the US is so self-involved. We're not even paying attention to what's going on elsewhere in the world. So there's not even enough to form an opinion, you know?
Now, this video was definitely supposed to be in good fun. I harbor no ill will towards the British. I find our rivalries as human beings across cultures, across nations, to be comical and interesting. It's like an insight into human psychology. And
same here. No hard feelings. It's all fun and games.
Despite all of the, criticizing going on here, I'd like to end on a positive note. I'd like to express my appreciation for a few things that I think the British do better than Americans. Your healthcare system, for one. Also, the Premier League. They say football was invented in England, and if that is true, as someone with Argentinian background, I can only thank you. I also have to thank you for your incredible music. What a contribution to our collective heritage.
Yeah.
It is a foreign idea to me to have a royal family, but I respect the commitment to tradition.
But I did move here the week that the Queen died, so it was really interesting to see. I think my first impression of like the British as a public was that of like mourning for their Queen, the 14-hour-long line to go see her lying in state. So I think it was a little bit of a shock. This might sound silly, but how procedural the British can be.
I watched that live, actually, the Queen's funeral procession and the whole 9 yards. Yeah, it was definitely interesting.
I noticed that tends to be, like every British person I've met, tends to be very procedural. As opposed to Americans, I think are a little bit more, like, dare I say, free-spirited or individualistic. So, I mean, I think that's not to say that one is better than the other.
And as a final note, we are obviously a world of individuals, and so stereotypes never fully work. Still, I find it so fascinating to explore the stereotypes and cliches that we have for one another. Not always, but often there is some sort of basis of truth there, or else they wouldn't spread and persist as they do. Anyway, having said all of that, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please consider liking it, which tells the algorithms to share this with more people. I thought it was fun, and it's a format I'd love to continue exploring. And also consider subscribing so that you can see more of the material that I make. With that, I hope to see you soon.
And consider subscribing to this channel as well. Let me know down below, what are your thoughts on this? How do you guys view this whole situation, right? And again, it's all in fun and games. Love the British people. Yeah, so you guys have a super fun, awesome day, and I will catch you guys in the next one, of course.